Vandana, before we get into our discussion about education and teacher education, your role, your ideas, let's hear about yourself and how you came to be here.
All right, that's interesting, Amukta, because very difficult to introduce your own self. You don't know how to talk about your own self. But yeah, starting from the basics, I'm something like 5 decades old, little more than that, and I work as a teacher educator in Delhi University. I work with an institution which had a tag of being the premier institution in Asia. We came up in 1947, but in 2023 we are trying to justify it further, that we retain the tag and we continue with that kind of legacy, So that's a struggle. We'll talk more about it when we get onto it. So primarily that, I come from, I have certain core values from the discipline of physics, because I done a master's in physics and then I moved over to education. So quite multidisciplinary in my approach by itself, because you've been through those things, and yeah, I think more when we get on to things, yeah.
And you recently became a professor.
Okay, yeah, I became a professor recently, yeah.
2 years.
More than that, but that's okay. That's not important. The years are not important. Yeah, I became a professor recently. 22, 23, I was on a Fulbright fellowship. So I went to this very amazing place in USA, which is Mississippi. So come back with a lot of enriched narratives. I was situated at Mississippi Valley State University in Etabina, the university campus, which is surrounded by cotton fields from all over the place. Yeah, that was another amazing experience. Yeah.
For your focus on diversity, I'm sure it was interesting to be in Mississippi rather than any other kind of a central university.
Absolutely so. I'll so agree with that, because the kind of insights I've got into the community structures, little bit of their political structures also, and more in the educational structures, that have given me a kind of, it has helped me create that vastness in the discourse on diversity and inclusion. We do understand that there are context-specific things which we need to address, but we also understand that there are certain generic ideas, that we have to talk about when we talk about diversity and inclusion and things like that. So yeah, definitely it has been a very significant aspect of my learning, and I think it is going to add more to my way of thinking as I grow further. So
this area of diversity, why do you think that's important, and why did you focus on it for the last many years?
So see, it did not start from diversity. Let's just start. I'll give you a little bit of background, and then we can probably understand, that how diversity was not the point of the beginning point, but how it was a point where I arrived at. So diversity is more of a point of arrival for me, and not something which I started with. Yeah. So 91, 92, I was a B.Ed student, Bachelor of Education. I just came out from my master's program in PhD, a master's program in physics, and then I was doing this small project in nuclear physics at JNU. We have this reactor and all that. There's Nuclear Science Center there. And I was very sure, that I'm going to get into research in nuclear science, because that's where the heart lied, And then suddenly I gave this exam. I had no, like when I say this, my students are like, can't be true, but it really, this is how it happened, So this happened, and then the B.Ed entrance happened. So I went to my professor, the physics professor, very hesitantly, and I told him that this is where I am right now. What do I do? And I think more than my family, my professor was excited, because he knew about the institution probably, or things like that. So he said that you've gone into a very great place, you must go there. It's just a 9 months course, and you just finish it and then you can come back to it, so it will give you a different kind of orientation and stuff like that. So I went for the course, and during this course something amazing happened. So from 11th grade onwards, that was around 2 years of 11th and 12th, 3 years of your bachelor's program, physics honors, and 2 years of your this thing, almost 7 years, you have not had a time where you can talk in the classroom, because physics is a very loaded kind of a content. Everything is pre-decided outside the classroom, and there is no scope for negotiation. So for somebody like me who has been a debater in the early years and things like that, it was good, but there was this kind of a urge to be able to speak in the classroom, to be able to talk, to be able to do that. And I think B.Ed classroom gave me that opportunity, and I was back in that kind of a mode where you can have conversations and you can do things like that. So the idea of the meaningful presence of student in a classroom, I think that started from that point when I entered that institution and I started looking forward to. When your teachers, they're pointing out to you and they're saying, okay, do you have a point of view on this? Whereas earlier the teacher will only say, are you listening to me? They drop a chalk and say, are you listening to me? And there is a person who is asking you that, do you want to say something about this? And they'll coolly wait for you to get into that zone, and they were not desperate and they were not in a hurry. So I think in the B.Ed program, when I was a student here. So that was quite kind of a change for me actually, and that's how it all started. And then I had this wonderful Professor Krishna Moitra, with whom I finally did my PhD research also. She was teaching educational psychology and she was working in the field of gifted at that moment. She came to the classroom and she had to do this session on gifted students with us. So she's talking about high ability, whatever, there's a discourse on gifted. I don't want to go into the details of that. But then she came up with a very interesting concept of gifted underachiever. Okay, where she started saying that these are the people whom, the word doesn't understand. So they don't score and they don't do well. But when they don't do well, the children who are not doing well, we got to be sitting with them, we got to be finding out. They may just not be finding any essence in the classroom. They may just be, the classroom may be just very basic for them and stuff like that. And that's where I'm thinking, I said, okay, that's why I never got marks in all my career. I was such an average scorer. So I started identifying myself as a gifted underachiever, But what happened during that program is that we realized that children are not different. We also realized that when they're not performing, it is not their own fault. And these are the kind of, ideas which we started getting into, which became more matured as we moved into the discipline and we worked through that. So when you asked me about diversity, why was it important for me to mention this? Is because these are my point of initiations into the world of education. Then I did my master's in education, and when I went back to my professor during my B.Ed program, I was giving him all these kind of narratives, and one day he suddenly said that, Vandana, I know you're not coming back to physics. So I think that's how the people with an experience will kind of come up with that. But yeah, then I never went back to physics in that way. So then I did my M.Ed, and M.Ed I did my dissertation in an interdisciplinary manner, which was gifted students in physics classroom. But how do I bring that gifted discourse to every child in the classroom? So typically in a gifted discourse, they were creating pockets of excellence. Here we thought that we want to talk about an every child kind of a context, and we did that. So I did that dissertation, which was actually appreciated, thanks to my teachers. Then I came over to, then we had this conference in '97, which was an international conference on gifted, where this person had come over, Mr. Enzuli, whose model I used in my dissertation, and he was standing. I just showed him that I used your model and tried to. He was just standing with the entire thing. He flipped over and he was like that. I never thought that this can actually be done with every child. So those kind of ideas, when we kind of contextualize them and when we try to look them in our own context, that becomes important. So my journey started with a very specific group of children, discussing about them, but bringing that discourse for the learning graph of every child in the classroom is how I kind of started working. I was already working as a teacher after finishing up with that. I taught, I was a science teacher. I taught classes 6th from 10th in Bal Bharati Public School, one of the private schools in Delhi. And after that, I came as a teacher here, as a faculty member in university. Now that entire idea again, because the idea of disabilities was getting recognized in the field of education. 95 we had this PWD Act, so we had a teacher preparation program, and because I was in that field, I got associated with that. So we had this institution affiliated to our university where diploma course for visual impairment was going on, which subsequently became a B.Ed program in visual impairment. So we went as a team to that place. I went with my senior teachers as a team to that place. We have been doing this lesson observations, the trainees goes to the field, and then we have discussions on their lessons and things like that. And there's a very typical mindset with which you go there. So I go to this class, which is where all the students are visually impaired. I go to this class, I sit behind like we always do. I look up and I don't see a blackboard there. Okay, so my first impression is that, oh, this classroom doesn't have a blackboard. And drop down within fraction of seconds, I'm like, there is no need for a blackboard. Okay, so when you have these kind of experiences, you understand the multiplicity of context more. So I was getting those kind of exposures time and again. But as I got into my classroom further, I realized that it's not the person's own situation or own experiences, but there are a lot of external factors which are playing a part in it. The social factors like your gender, your caste, your class, your resourcefulness, which is not your own, but which is created by outside factors. So realize that social factors create a very significant part in you coming up, learning, your learning curves, because every time my focus even now is the learning curve of your student. How do you kind of mobilize it and escalate it and take it ahead? So you realize that even those external factors are very important, that they play a very critical role. You go further in your education years and you realize that social factors have a very, cultural and a very political impact. So you try to, your focus is vastening like this. You start from gifted, you go to this. And every time you're realizing that there is more to it, there is more to it, there is more to it. And that is when I said that my Fulbright fellowship has added, there is more to it, there is more to it, So these kind of experiences were going ahead. And there was a constant struggle that if I want to do something as a teacher, what should I do? And that was always a question, that what should I do as a teacher? And that is where I realized that I came up with two terms, One is exclusion and other was diversity. So for me, diversity is a concept. Diversity is not something, it is being used in a very fancy manner now. We all know that. Everywhere, everybody is talking about diversity, inclusion. I mean, like, it's just a very casual kind of a reference, but this time, even in TV shows, we say that, in the name of diversity and inclusion, and it is being spoken about. I'm not saying something against that, but what I'm trying to say is that it has become a kind of a word which everybody wants to talk about. Like a tagline, and like something like a promotional core value of an institution or of a profession, something like that. So these are the 2 points where I arrived at. And then I had to now think about these things, that we want inclusion, okay? We want inclusion of people. How, as a teacher, should I approach it? That was my conflict, that was my struggle. If I talk about exclusion, if I have a lot of narratives about exclusion, which is present, and I don't deny the process of exclusion. There is a systematic process of exclusion which has happened, and which has happened across all groups of people for different reasons, different factors and things like that. So exclusion as a phenomena cannot be ignored, it cannot be denied, it's there. So should the approach be based on exclusion? Because certain people were excluded, certain situations were excluded, and we have to make an effort to include it. That was one idea which could have come up. There was another idea where we could have spoken about inclusion from contesting the idea of inclusion by itself. Supposing, what does that mean? Supposing I say school, okay? So when I talk about a school and I say certain children are out of school, so what should be my idea? Should I get all the children in the school, or should I expand the boundaries of school? You know, so if I work on first approach, that I get all the children in school, my methodology, my style would be different. But if I work on this concept that I extend the boundaries of school, that meant something else. And that is where the idea of diversity comes in. So when we are talking about inclusion, whether I want to undo all those reasons for which the person or community or ABZ was excluded, or do I work upon the concept of inclusion itself, which has been so exclusory for many people, for many situations?
In the institutions itself.
Absolutely. Because I work in an institution, so my approach is primarily institutionalized. I look at institutions being more open, institutions being more diverse in their approach and things like that. So that is where I had to kind of, justify my idea, where I said that if you say these are the 5 abilities which a child should have, but the child says that I have 10 other abilities which are not these 5. So should we make the child acquire those 5 abilities which include the child, or should I change the list of abilities and say that these are the 15 abilities, and the children having all these abilities are called as, learned people, if I want to use that word in the institutional kind of an idea. So I think that is where I thought focusing on diversity is what we require to do it, because education should enhance people's condition. They should not ask for change in people's condition. A lot of things which will be left behind, the cultural rootedness that we have within ourselves, I am a great supporter of that. Maybe it's my personal kind of a value system, but I think you have to be rooted. And it doesn't work, even in plants it doesn't work that they're rooted somewhere else, you uproot them, you root them in some other soil, they won't flourish like that. So I think that was my idea. That
so starting within a sense of acceptance of of different differences, and then accepting in a sense, then it's a bringing in, once you accept it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you reject it and say we want only this, then that doesn't happen.
That's right. But you have to allow me to change this word acceptance, because that's also a little hegemonic, that I accept you, which means there is still a lot of I and you. So acknowledging is a word which I would like to use instead of accepting. Acknowledging that people are different, acknowledging that difference is natural, difference is organic, and let's just learn how to be with different people around us, how to be respectful with different people around us. I think that's the core.
Yeah. Lovely to hear you. What do you think has happened in the institutions that you have been in over the years, if this idea of not only diversity but also adding inclusion into it and respect for the other, how has all that been brought into some of the institutions, or in people, or in the programs?
Yeah. So I think institutions by itself are very static, and there is an inherent inertia within the institution. And this idea of what to carry forward and what to change is always a kind of a challenge, because different people are thinking about it at a different point of time. So if something was set up in 1950 in the institution, and if I'm thinking in 1985 what to retain and what to change, I think this is a different set of people who don't conceptualize, who don't foresee the same way. So that idea by itself is a very flawed idea according to me, if I'm allowed to use that word. how do you develop those kind of critical insights where we are able to see institution vis-a-vis the surroundings, the contemporization, the context. That is important for us. I remember my institution in 91 to 93, I was there as a BA level student, being heavily loaded with girls. There were little boys onto that. We were doing teacher preparation for secondary school. Then, 95 the commission came, the pay commission came. And the pay commission gave a lot of significant increase in the emoluments of the teachers. They did a lot of things for teachers economically. So 96, 97, when I go to my institution, I see a lot of boys there also. Right? So these kind of factors, even if I wanted to change the social demography of the institution in say 1980, 1990, it would not have happened, because how do you attract people in terms of that? There is nothing which you can go and influence the community with. So these kind of junctures, they really make the things very, very different. When I don't remember throughout my school, I'm from a public school system. I've studied in government schools of Delhi. I have not seen any child with visual impairment in my school. I'm talking about 70s and 80s, 1986 I passed out from school from grade 12th. I don't see any visual impaired child. I go to B.Ed, very few. My physics honors, nobody with visual impairment I can see in my classroom. MSc physics, I don't see any visual impaired person. Now when I come to, come 1995 policy, then the adaptation of it, we had, students coming from different backgrounds. Visual impairment being one of the most rapidly added kind of a segment of people, because the group was very active. The group which was mobilizing the education and rights of people with visual impairment has been very active. So I think that is something which brought them into the system once. So another, the juncture comes in where the teachers now have to kind of prepare themselves to have visual impaired students in the classroom. So I think these are the kind of things which happen due to policy, and then people keep dropping in, and the social configuration keeps on changing, and every time you have to adapt to that configuration, you have to learn to that, do certain different things in the classroom and things like that. So we are a central university, and we have people coming over from all the place. Once in physics class, I had this international student who would not understand Hindi, and I had a group of students from Rajasthan who would not understand English, and there were others, who were partly bilingual, Hindi, English, they were able to manage. So I mean, that class became the most interesting session for me for that particular year, because how we evolved a mechanism of peer tutoring, where everyone took the responsibility that whatever is happening in the class. So Vandana is going to be speaking in Hindi or English or bilingual, but she can't do everything in Hindi also and in English also. So these students of mine, they took that responsibility, and they started kind of ensuring that everyone understands every point that is being spoken in the classroom. So I think these are the kind of things which help you understand that this is a possibility to create a change of thought with people, with practice of course. And with experience, I also want to say this, that it's easy to work with students no matter what age group is, and it's very difficult to work with your colleagues, and it's extremely impossible to work with your senior colleagues who have been your teachers at one point in time, that they're just still thinking of you in that kids zone, and they were like, okay, yeah, okay, you have an idea, we are happy to know your idea. Very interesting teachers, very inclusive teachers, but still, they're like, not hierarchy, that kind of idea, okay, so you're fresh, you're coming up with this idea, you're coming up with this idea, you stay here for 5 years and you'll understand it doesn't work, those kind of things that you think will go away. But I stayed there for 25 years and I have lots of things that worked in the system, that involved making courses. So 97 I joined. The first thing which I did in 2003 was change the courses, all the science courses with the post.
How did that happen?
that was an interesting episode, you know, because I went to my head and I said, this needs to be changed. And the head was like, you really think so? I said, no, I don't think so. You look at the syllabus. Do you want this to be changed? And he said, yes, it should be changed. So, you know.
Physics or?
I was teaching physics. I said, I want to change physics. And then there were people in chemistry and biology and all over the place. I just had to go around and speak with them. You know, these are the teachers who have supervised my classes when I was a student and things like that. But I found a positive kind of a, you know, association with the science fraternity. So we did that kind of a change. We actually changed the entire course, the entire perspective, with people dropping in, collaborating, and we did that. And once we did that kind of an exercise, it did become an example for others also, because they were saying that, okay, to teach this course we have to work differently now. It can't be done with the same approach.
So can you give some examples of what change you brought into the course, into the curriculum?